So welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast. This is where we explore the new game-changing understanding that can unlock new levels of performance, resourcefulness, and well-being in the workplace. Join us if you want to be part of the new breed of leaders in business. Join us if you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber. And join us if you want to be part of the new revolution in understanding how the mind works and recognize that we are more than just our psychology and that can lead to better results.
Hello and welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. And in today's episode, which we're recording on the 13th of April 2020, and we are in the middle of the pandemic, for anyone who's going to be listening to this in a few months or years' time. And I'm got a great guest on today. And this guest, Matt O'Neill, I've actually had already on the show because he is a futurist. And he's also someone that has a great appreciation of the principles of quality of mind. And we thought we would get together to have a chat about what it's been like for us over the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks personally, what we've been noticing about the mind. And then also get into what's this going to mean for the future? What's this going to mean for how we work and how we interact as human beings? And I can't think of a better person to do that conversation with than an actual futurist, Matt. So welcome to the show again, Matt.
Thank you very much, Piers.
So, first of all, Matt, just give people a quick 15, 20 seconds on who you are. I mean, they can go back and look at the previous recording, but just tell people a little bit about you and then we'll get into it.
So thanks, Piers. I've been a futurist for about 4 years now, but the technical way of describing my work, and I know it sounds horribly pretentious, is a neo-generalist, i.e. somebody who is a jack of all trades, hopefully a master of some. And, you know, I've been working in sort of mainly the kind of creative industries, producing sort of all sorts of everything from websites to videos, you know, you name it, we've done it. And I'm currently in a period of metamorphosis as I'm moving into running online events. So that's a bit about where I am.
Matt, even your job titles sound futuristic. So you have a brand consistency there in how you talk about yourself. As you're metamorphosing. I suppose the old language of that is you're pivoting in your futurism. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I don't think that you stop doing what you've done. It's just that you continue growing. You know, I think that's the way I look at it.
Brilliant. Well, that's why I like having you on this conversation. So, first of all, Matt, say what it's been like for you in the last I guess 4 to 6 weeks since, I mean, we're both in the UK for listeners to know, what it's been like since our country's entered into this pandemic and we've been on lockdown now for 3 or 4 weeks. So just what's it been like? And I'm particularly curious as to know, given your understanding of the mind, what have you been noticing that's been going on at a mind level?
Well, the first thing is, Piers, I've missed haircuts. You know, like I really, really miss a good haircut, and I'm starting to look more like a bear than a Matt at the moment. I suppose the other thing that I found it slightly irksome is, you know, the amount of judgment that I see, you know, especially on social media, or even this morning I was at the supermarket and, you know, was just looking at some things on a shelf. And a lady was being very passive-aggressive to another lady for not correctly social distancing. And sometimes I wonder if, you know, it's almost a phenomenon of people actually going to parks in order to take photos and complain about other people going to parks, kind of thing. So, you know, that I've found sort of irksome. I wish there was less judgment, but it's also helped me to reflect on myself as well. So I suppose that from the perspective of sort of what I've noticed in myself, there's definitely been that. Do you want me to go into some of the practicalities as well?
Well, I think just to touch on what you just said there for a moment before we get into some of the other things that have been for you is, I mean, what I've noticed is that there is a lot of that judgment around. You can see that on social media. You can see that in people's faces sometimes if you walk out and accidentally cough. But I think at a mind level, it's a really interesting example of I put this in quality of mind language, we're seeing more extremes at both ends of the aperture. So what I mean by that is that there's more, there's wonderful displays of sort of compassion and love and volunteering and contribution and support going on, which we would describe as a higher aperture, a higher quality of mind. But we're seeing in ourselves and therefore in others, more examples of judgment, insecurity, fear and anxiety. So we're getting a more fully rounded human experience at the moment. That's bearing out by what you're seeing in the supermarket. So but Matt, carry on. Tell us some more about how it's been for you.
I suppose those are two things that come to mind immediately. I, like many other people, I've been sort of losing some work. For example, we had our first ever virtual reality project where we were going to create a VR experience for one of our clients at a trade exhibition. And that was very exciting. Then, of course, that sort of went away. Fortunately, got one or two clients who are still managing to keep the shutters open. So very grateful to those people. I think, some of the business areas that I would have been involved in, because I work a lot kind of around corporate events, in and around corporate events, those have clearly gone away, at least for the short term. And so, I'm in the process, as I say, of pivoting at the moment and making some changes. I don't think that it's really survival of the fittest anymore so much as it is survival of the most agile. So that's why I've been making serious study and investments into helping clients run really good quality online events.
I mean, fascinating, man. Likewise, my the sort of face-to-face programs we run have all stopped, and we are doing some things virtually. But the other challenge that we're finding is how do you cut through to someone now when there's so everyone's very busy, furloughing their staff or doing whatever they're doing, or just being busy, and there's a lot of noise out there in the market. How do you cut through with a really interesting, powerful offer? But anyway, that's another question.
Well, I'll add something to that, Piers. I think there is a way of cutting through. So, yes, we're all conscious of the fact that we're not quite as busy with our businesses necessarily. That can phase, that can have ebbs and flows. But yesterday, for example, I was listening to a podcast, and one of the interviewees made a really good point that inspired the life out of me. He said, don't think about this time as marketing and selling. Think about it more as, can you be of service to your clients? So for example, this morning before we came onto the podcast, I started emailing a few clients that we work with and just saying to them, look, don't worry about the money. If we can be there just as, if we can offer you, say, some, just an ear, or, you want some help with some communications or whatever it happens to be, not everything is about the money. And I think that in the long term, I think if you're offering service, the guy in the podcast said it perfectly. He said, if someone's drowning, you don't offer them swimming lessons. You just pull them out of the water. Then you can talk about the swimming lessons. And I think that if we can offer service, then we're already cutting through so much of the noise.
Well, that's such an interesting point, because I think that's what contributes to the noise in sometimes. So because everyone is, not everyone, a lot of people are offering things, and often the money's they're not after money. They're saying, we can help. There's a lot of people offering help. And I think there's a lot of positivity around. But something really interesting I've noticed is the space or aperture that positivity comes from, or that we can help and support comes from. And there's a difference between people who truly see what is going on now as a way, just to be different, to be agile, are coming from a secure foundation in the mind, and happen to be saying things that can be supportive and positive, and people who aren't, but are putting that kind of veneer on top. But accidentally what they're doing is still instilling a kind of insecurity, fear and anxiety based to this current situation, that this current situation has a kind of a heavy, deep power to throw us all, off our game and that kind of thing. So I think there's a difference between people who are who are saying positive things, but fundamentally are still quite ungrounded themselves in the power of this pandemic to change things, and people who actually see that this is just what is going on at the surface, and therefore their positivity and support is coming from a better foundation, which won't be exaggerating the fear of the mind pandemic that's going alongside the fear of the body one. Does that make sense? And I think it's a really different space to be in, and the noise is where those two get confused.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I mean, you've just prompted something else that's related, which is, I've been thinking about, say, myself, and I'm guessing you as well. We're sort of pretty well set up to kind of go through this challenge. We're not going to be running out of food. We've got a roof over our heads. We've both got gardens. We've both got sort of physical space and a certain amount of, I guess, for me, I feel kind of secure to ride this out. But, if I was living in a different scenario, certainly 20 years ago, I was very much hand to mouth. I might have looked at this in an entirely different way.
Well, and that is interesting. And I'm not being flippant or disrespectful to people here who don't have some of the creature comforts that you and I have, Matt. But I do think it's about what level you look at that at. So at the level of the game of life, then yes, it could be very different. People might be struggling for food. They might be struggling to see people they love. They might even lose their health or lose the health of someone that they know well and their friends and family. And those things could well change through this. And it might be for more than just a few months. But I think at a more foundational level, we have got something else to rely on. That there is something, there's a level of okayness that is at a deeper level. So really at the level that matters is the way I describe it. And that's our capacity for resilience, creativity, connection, realization, which is how we're going to be agile through this. And I think that's what we need to look at. Because if we look too much at, well, I'll be okay as long as, my money doesn't run out, or I'll be okay as long as this only lasts for 4 weeks or 4 months, or as long as the economy is okay by March next year. If we put an arbitrary line on where we think our okayness comes from, we're basically banking on optimism. Or we're sort of saying our happiness or our well-being or our resilience or creativity or whatever is linked to a condition, which is to do with an amount of money or an amount of time. And that's fine. Our conceptual mind's going to do that. But I think if we can go a little bit more foundational than that, we can see that even without that arbitrary level of okayness, we're still okay at the level that matters. Right? And that I think is really foundational for people to see. And that's what shifts it from I'm being positive and optimistic about this because it will pass to I'm foundationally always okay at the level that matters. And I think that's such an important distinction. But that's what gets missed in the noise. Does that make some sense, Matt, and the way I'm describing?
Yeah. I mean, I've found sort of oscillating between what you term low and high quality of mind quite a lot recently, I think. But I suppose on some level, I always know that the capacity for it is there. It's just sometimes I get a bit caught up in the thinking.
Well, and that's the nature of being this wonderful thing we call human. But I also just wanted to pick up on something else you said, because I think we chatted about it before the call, Matt. And that is, you mentioned about being agile. It wasn't just about sort of survival of the fittest. It was survival of the most agile. And things like being agile and being able to deal with uncertainty have been talked about, in textbooks and people say it on podcasts, you need to be agile. Now, I think what this situation at the moment gives us an ability to do is actually realize that rather than just know it. Right? Because now actually, I actually can be agile. That's you're sort of seeing it in a much more powerful way than just knowing it's an idea of something to be. So, do you want to say a bit more about that? Because on the sort of the way of being agile, how you see that now powerfully.
Yeah, I mean, one thing it's done actually is it's really helped me to realize how accelerated I often used to cite agility in my futurist work, especially around future of work, as being a core skill of the future. But it seems like the future has arrived quite quickly. I used to refer to it, say if in general terms, I would often talk about sort of how the world was heading into computerization and humanization, and explore, some of the elements of both of those and then how they overlap. And agility to me, I always used to see it as something, especially as contingent labor is well into the ascendancy at the moment. I used to sort of put it as, to the people who I was working with, workshops or audiences at a conference, your kids probably need to be comfortable waking up not knowing what they're going to be doing that day. But that seems to have arrived a lot more quickly and a lot more intensely as well. So, I mean, one example, I think, a really practical example is, who would have thought, if I'd had a conversation with you 8 weeks ago and said that the NHS will behave like a startup in 8 weeks or 4 weeks, would you have believed me, right? Probably not, I guess. The fact that it was able to get an app up and running with sort of nearly 500,000 volunteers, it was able to build these field hospitals for thousands of people around the country. And obviously, to do everything that in order to be more prepared. I mean, that's astounding, really. And I think the number of businesses out there that have had to adapt themselves in some way. I mean, I wonder if can we hold on to some of that startup mentality in our larger businesses and larger organizations? Because can you imagine what that will do for innovation?
Well, I think, this is a really interesting point. And when we come to the mind, I think it's so fascinating. So what people would describe is, well, the NHS must have shifted mindset to be able to do those things so quickly, right? To knock a hospital out in 8 days kind of thing, right? So, and they would have let go of probably a lot of their protocol process and just gone with it, right? And I think what's so interesting about that is people might say, oh, well, necessity breeds innovation, or tough times allow us to think differently. It's not tough times, right? It's letting go of conceptual mind thought and seeing what's possible, right? And this is about a realization, is what you're saying is that how do we keep this going, for the next 5-10 years after this pandemic has had its initial hit on us? Well, we just have to notice what the mind was doing when we were able to be that have that agility and that ability to think differently, not going, oh, that was because we had a difficult situation, we had COVID, right? And I think this is why I'm really, really hoping that people don't lose sight of what the mind was able to do, whether that's down to the amount of compassion we're seeing right now, the amount of agility we're seeing right now, the amount of love we're seeing right now, just to go, not to pass that off and go, oh, that was just because it was then. No. This is a inherent inbuilt capacity of the mind, which we can have even when everything is going swimmingly in the perceived outside world. So I think it's so important that we do capture that, but we don't capture it as a feature of the situation.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'll tell you what would be funny is whether people start to make case studies out of this and then reverse engineer it 6 months down the line.
I'm sure they will. I'm absolutely positive that will happen. And that's why, for me, it'd be so important to try and take a little bit of hang on a minute. And I was talking to a leader the other day who said he was actually quite relaxed at the moment because he kind of felt this wasn't really his fault, what was going on to his business. Right. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. The fascinating bit to take there is, right, in a year's time when you're feeling, stressed about things not going well in the business, and you do think it's your fault, remember this aperture you're in, right? Because it's nothing to do with the outside world, this, right? So capture that and remind yourself that you can feel like this even when everything's going haywire around you. And but you're right. I think that probably what will happen is we'll reverse engineer it and miss the mind in all of this.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding what a realization is about. What is this thing that we can have as human beings? What is this capacity we have, which is a realization? And that is for one set of thinking or mindset to drop and a new one to emerge. And it's beautifully intelligent. It's beautifully contextual to the moment. So that's why we're having realizations at the moment about what to do about this rather than about something else. And it comes along when we get out of the way of our conceptual mind, when we get out of the way of all our thinking, when we stop holding so tight to what we think is right, true, ourselves. When we surrender that, this stuff comes up.
Yeah.
Why in crisis people are quite agile.
There's a real practical point now you've just mentioned that I've just realized, which was, in the stages of pulling together this new side venture, well, it could become a main venture, let's see, running the online event. Sometimes, you often use the metaphor of, you can row through life or you can sail through it. And there were some times where, I wasn't feeling quite motivated, a bit demotivated. And then I'd beat myself up saying, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And then, I would just sort of back off it. And then other days where suddenly the energy just seemed to arise and I'd do more in sort of 4 hours than I had in the last 2 days. By orders of magnitude. And so, talking about trusting the system, it was nice when that happened. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it's such a good point because, you and I have worked remotely for many years. Well, I don't even say it remotely. I just work where I am. Remote sounds like you're distant or something, but I don't even say working from home. It's just working. And therefore probably use the sailing sort of way of just doing what we want to do when we want to do it, rather than having to sit in an office and do it between 9 and 5, right? So we're probably a bit more tuned into that. In my day, I don't do things unless I feel like doing them, unless I got, some external commitment, I guess. But for a lot of people, they're used to discipline being their motivational sort of channel. And what we're pointing to now is, well, actually, there's a more foundationally powerful way of tuning into your own resourcefulness that you're probably getting to see a bit more now because you've got less external things disciplining you.
Yeah.
And once you get into that sailing rather than rowing, wow, things happen. You get quantum productivity.
Yeah.
So that's lovely.
I like that phrase. I'm borrowing that. Oh, sorry, not borrowing. They call it reappropriating. We're hearing so much about this Zoom fatigue at the moment. Are people sort of feeling like they're struggling from just having so many hours of the day fixated on a screen? So I guess that leads to, an element of fatigue. But also the question that I think is really interesting is what does it mean for intimacy? Is intimacy something that purely comes from those paralinguistic cues that we get from looking into the whites of someone's eyes? Or is it something altogether different?
Well, that's where I get, because you and I chatted about this the other week about what I call virtual intimacy. And, if I look at it from slightly more upstream now from the mind, it would look to me that a lot of us, well, most of us, society's been conditioned to get a feeling of connection, intimacy from proximity, from, being close to someone that they're near you through touch or look or whatever. And that's how we get our connection hit. Now, if you think about actually what the mind is, we know that's not the only way of getting it because, how many times have you looked at a photo of a friend or a family member and had just a warm feeling of connection? And how many times you've done that without even having a photo in front of you? They just appear in your mind and you can feel love or you can feel compassion or you can feel whatever it is you want to feel. So we know we don't need proximity, physical proximity to feel connected and intimate. But I think we've detuned ourselves from that through the fact that we're very social beings and don't get me wrong, there is at the game of life level a need for social connection because we learn socially and we procreate socially. But there's no reason why we can't recalibrate ourselves to have virtual intimacy. So I just don't think we're tuned into it. And it's something that over time I think we will start to warm up to, that we will appreciate that consciousness is bigger than just being in proximity, and you can get a lovely hit of connection by not being near someone. I think that'd be really foundational.
Yeah. I mean, I said to you before, I think some of the most connected moments of my life have been just over a phone. And I just remember feeling so surprised by that, especially the first time it happened. Like that. There was just a feeling of almost just pure love. My entire body was tingling in every sense of the word. I shall never forget it. I shall never forget it. And so that told me an awful lot about intimacy. And it doesn't have to be something, as you say, where we're in person with someone else.
But I think that the implication for that, for how we run our online meetings, is interesting, because what it seems to be at the moment is a lot of people are going, well, okay, we need to get people on the Zoom call or whatever, and we need to have nice PowerPoint presentations. We need to have this, we need to have that. And actually, they're not giving the space in that online arena for just, and this will sound a bit odd, but let's just connect with each other, even though we're here, kind of thing. And we instead we get bombarded with slides and blah, blah, blah. So it's about actually just tuning back in to that humanness, even though, I mean, to be fair, some people don't even do it in face-to-face either, but it's even more neglected, but it's even more needed when it comes to virtual meeting. So I think that'll be an implication. We've been saying for years that the only constant is change, right? Now, I think what COVID's done, if I sort of take a theme from everything you've been saying, is it's just exaggerating and enhancing that change, right? Which was always happening. It was always the only constant, but it's now becoming more vivid, and there's a higher impact on people, and it's speeded it up. So, and actually, it's funny, isn't it? Earlier this year, when we saw some of those environmental things going on, like the fires in Australia and all the floods in the UK, etc., and Extinction Rebellion and voices like that, they're going, actually, the planet's speeding up on what it wants us to help with the environment. And then here's COVID coming along, helping us speed up on other things of change. So it's like a massive wake-up call. And I think, well, from my biased perspective, it's all about understanding the mind differently. And if we do that, we'll be able to be agile, have realizations, and survive and thrive in this. But there's really nowhere to hide now from COVID. I don't think there's anyone going, what's going on, really? So it's like the biggest wake up call, and it's going to exaggerate and enhance all this change. And to me, the factor that will make the difference between whether it's change that is kind of exciting, pleasant, nice, enriching, fulfilling, or whether we all go down the other way and it feels like overwhelm and, oh my God, we can't cope and we all get depressed and anxious, is the mind. I do think that will make the difference, because that also controls our own resourcefulness to do the practical things, like the things you're talking about, to match the evolving for what we need. So
I mean, on one level, Piers, aren't we so lucky to get to experience something like this in our lifetime? I know not everybody would agree, but, to be able to have this shared experience with, all these people, well, pretty much everybody is affected by it. And, who knows where it's going to take us. But, I also think sometimes we, people who are alive now, are amongst the luckiest people to have ever lived. Like we started, when I was young, 30 years ago, playing outside on bicycles, and just always getting into trouble and stuff. And then, eventually getting into personal computers, but still having the benefit of that outdoor life, and then moving into a more digital life. And it just feels like, and travel, just being able to freely travel. I'm so grateful. I've probably been to about 80 different countries in my life, So I think that in many ways we're incredibly lucky to get to experience this. And yes, there's a lot of downside to it, but my God, isn't it exciting?
Well, I agree. And life's for living. And I don't mean that in a hedonistic way, living as in living it up. I just mean to embrace everything that is happening, and not to try and control it, which is one thing we like to try and do. Because, I think as things have been telling us recently, you can't control it. You can't know the future, right? If you try and control and know, you're going to be limiting yourself. It's strap yourself in, know what the mind's potential is, and enjoy it or not enjoy it. But whatever it is, it's a rich experience. It's an ebb and flow. It's a roller coaster, and that roller coaster will bother you if you try and either control the roller coaster or have a view that it shouldn't be like that. Right?
No, in other words, like you can't future-proof anything, but you can be future-ready.
Well, that's right. And I think it is an exciting time to be on this part of this ecosystem. And the more we go with it, the more fun it will be. So, or fun may be the wrong word sometimes, but it is part of the human experience, and that's what we need to encompass surrender to, but not surrender to in a head in the sand way, but surrender to allow the sailing rather than the rowing. So the rowing being trying to psychologically manage it, and the sailing being, well, actually, let's just see what turns up. And now is a rare opportunity, although they may become less rare, to do that. So Matt, we could speak all day. Any sort of final thoughts you'd like to sort of encapsulate this all with?
Well, actually, I was just going to sort of in support of what you do, Piers. I mean, I was chatting with some friends the other day, and somebody said, aren't we lucky to be mentally equipped to deal with this? I wouldn't say like I'm the most super aware person, but I have glimpses. I have glimpses, and I kind of, in your mind, in your way of expressing things and mine now, I kind of oscillate between a lower and a higher aperture, more so hopefully on the higher. And I think that by having that sort of, by having that way of that worldview, being able to look at the world, it's a lot easier place to live than if you're always getting bunged up with your thoughts.
Yes, and I think now is a very telling time for that. So and I would, first of all, I appreciate what you've just said, and I would also put an offer out to anyone who is going, well, okay, you two seem to be okay about this. How are you doing that? Right? We'll reach out and ask us. Very happy to be generous on helping people through at this time. There's also other podcast episodes that people might want to listen to around COVID and connection and things. So I'm I know you are, Matt, too, very happy to share what you see to help people. So this can recognize there are people out there who are not finding it as exciting as you and I are. So appreciate you, Matt, giving it your time to talk. Always fascinating. I'll put some of your information in the show notes if people want to know more about how to get hold of you or some of the exciting things you're up to. But thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And as for everyone else, have fun being curious, and do check out some of our other podcasts. Until next time, have fun, stay safe, see you soon.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please reach out and leave us a review and a comment. If you want more info, check out makingchangework.co.uk or Piers Thurston on LinkedIn.